Another Doctor, another Dalek, another Doctor Who action figure collector set. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the third and final Doctor Dalek set released as a part of the B&M exclusive 2019 Big Finish collector sets. This time round featuring the War Doctor as portrayed by the late John Hurt alongside a Dalek scientist. This is of course from the War Doctor Big Finish series and in particular the story called A Thing of Guile. The recommended retail for this set is $19.99 and I do believe that it is a limited edition to 6,000 units. Therefore there is also enough to go around and it is exclusive to B&M stores throughout the UK. So taking a closer look at the packaging, it is your usual stylish layout featuring a rather lovely window to take a look at the products on the inside of the box. The inclusion of John Hurt in the rather stylish Big Finish sidebar, which is a really lovely reference to the Big Finish layout design. And then of course at the bottom of this on the plastic we do get your usual limited edition golden sticker. At the bottom banner we get the title of the set, along with the character options and Big Finish logo, and just above this we have A Thing of Guile, which is of course the story that both of these figures apparently appeared in. Sides of the box feature the rather stunning inclusion of A Thing of Guile's cover, including John Hurt as well as the Dalek as seen throughout the story, a mutant Dalek eye, and even one of the mutations seen throughout the episode, which is a really lovely touch and definitely makes this box stand out. Back of the box is your usual 5.5 collector series layout with the logo and the title of the set at the top, some company information and the contents at the bottom, and a graphic of the TARDIS towards the side. Middle of this it does have a rather nice write-up about the Time War along with the War Doctor story A Thing of Guile, as well as another inclusion of the cover, this time in its full layout, including the sidebar and stating that it is written by Phil Morine. Above this it does also state that the episode is available to be purchased on the Big Finish website, which I highly recommend checking out if you haven't already. The top of the box features your usual information, also stating once more that this is from a Big Finish audio adventure, and at the very bottom it does also have some company information. All three of the sets featured within this series do also include a backdrop, which features some Dalek spaceships, as well as some explosions, and everything that you would come to expect from the Time War. So here we have the War Doctor and his Dalek scientist friend out of the box. Now without a doubt this set is going to be the least popular compared to the other two sets within the series, and that is unavoidable simply because the other set includes a Dark Eyes McGann and literally a bright blue Dalek, and the other one has a rather eye-catching Dalek with the black hemispheres and black dome, which make it visually striking and stand out on display. The Dalek within this set, yes, is different within its colour scheme. However, it's kind of a subtle change, and when it's on display with the other bronze Daleks, it won't stand out as much, and naturally if you've got the other War Doctor figure, there's not really too much that they can do with the War Doctor to make him look too different from the original figure. But that said, both of them within this set are still kind of nice variants. Naturally, if you're a figure collector and if you're a Big Finish fan, you'll have the urge to pick up this set anyway. However, I imagine that out of all of them, this set will probably be on the shelves the longest. So if you are trying to pick and choose the sets that you want to buy without risking them selling out before you get the opportunity to buy them, I will probably leave this set to one of the last that you pick up out of the B&M 2019 range. Since I'm feeling a little bit different throughout this video, I've decided to in fact change it up a little bit and take a look at the Dalek first. So I think the first thing to address with this Dalek is the quite obvious differences between the Dalek figure itself and the actual cover art seen on A Thing of Guile, and there is an obvious difference being that this Dalek is quite obviously silver, and this one, judging by my eyes, is quite obviously blue, or at least a purpley blue colour, and this one isn't. I don't quite know why they've done this. Maybe they just decided that silver looks better than the purple. I wouldn't know. I've not seen a purple Dalek, but I do genuinely think that this one probably looks a little bit more exciting than this figure. Dalek is a Dalek, and a Dalek will be popular in the merchandising side of things anyway, and people without a doubt will buy it. However, from the more creative side of things, much like say the Dalek Time Strategist or even the Axis Strike Dalek, it would have been nice to maybe see them take more creative license with this figure, add in a few changes here and there, maybe adding a few more weathered splatters or something like that, or maybe even just adjusting the paint taps just to give it a more exciting feel. Even though this figure is a direct reuse of the more slimmer 2005 New Series Bronze Dalek sculpt, it is still a really impressive design and features a brilliant amount of detail. As with the other Daleks released as a part of this series, the fender has been sculpted out of your standard black plastic and does have several different panels around the sides, along with the inclusion of the rivets, which, much like the other Daleks, I would have really liked to see these rivets actually painted a silver colour, or maybe even have an additional wash of weathered paint added over the top. Moving up to the skirt of the Dalek, at first glance there isn't really too much going on, so I'm just going to compare it to the Crucible Dalek to actually reveal that there is a number of things going on. Much like the other bronze Dalek, the Axis Strike one, there has been a complete change in the colour of bronze, so this time round we have a much lighter bronze that has been used compared to this much more almost goldy bronze that has been seen here on this Crucible Dalek released a number of years ago. And of course the most obvious change being that the hemispheres on this Dalek are now silver as opposed to your regular goldy colour. Now I think that this is nice, it kind of stands out, however at the same time it does kind of blend in with the bronze. It certainly doesn't stand out as much as the Axis Strike Dalek. And of course over the top of this we also have a weathering that has been applied very much like the Axis Dalek, however it seems to be a bit more obvious on this Dalek and doesn't fit in as much. That is probably because the bronze underneath is actually a bit more lighter. We do have almost a blemish design around this, almost like a melted plastic or a smudge design, which can be seen once again a little bit more around the back of the figure, and generally just makes this Dalek look a little bit more war-torn. As we can see, just moving up to the midpoint section, much like on the Axis Dalek here, we once again have a collection of dirt and muck around the sides, nicely bringing out the detail. Sadly on my Dalek, I don't know if this is something that is a reoccurrence with the others, there does seem to be a few scratches here and there as you can see, or maybe even where that darker paint application has in fact collected on the different hemispheres, especially around the bottom, which does make it look like the paint has been scratched off a little bit. However, considering that once again this is a Dalek from within the Time War, I suppose a little bit of damage is kind of a nice touch. The weaponry section of the Dalek does once again retain all of the really lovely details seen on all of the previous releases, including the paint application of the golden slats around the side, which have been also given the silver paint tap of the rivets at the top and the bottom. On the front we once again have the weaponry sockets, which have been highlighted by using a golden circle around the edges. The gun of the Dalek is your standard slim sculpt, retaining the same detail once more. And the same does also apply for the Dalek manipulator arm, exactly the same sculpt to usual, with of course the sucker at the very end, which has been split into your usual panelled sections, which is a nice attention to detail. Maybe this could have been a good opportunity on this Dalek to feature the use of a different Dalek utensil, maybe the Crucible Dalek arm, or maybe a Assault Dalek arm or something like that, just to make this Dalek stand out as a scientist Dalek as opposed to a regular Dalek. Once again, that will create a little bit of variety within this set, making this Dalek stand out further from the others. The barrel section of the Dalek, we've all seen this before, exactly the same detailing, a really lovely mesh design underneath, covered by the bronze discs over the top, with a few rivets in this once again. However, unlike my other Daleks that I've got within this collection, there does seem to be a few paint leaks on this, especially with the bronze over to the black. So I do recommend once again going into store and actually picking your products and giving a good look at them to ensure that there isn't really any paint bleed that is quite obvious. And then of course at the very top of the Dalek we get the dome that is painted silver and is probably one of the main things that you've actually spent the 20 quid for. Aren't Doctor Who fans sad? I speak as one myself. So we have the eye stalk and everything that is as per usual the same sculpt, silver, the clear dishes, and then of course the blue pupil at the very end as well. And the rest of the dome exactly the same sculpt. We have the nice panels here and there, the rivets around the eye stalk socket, and then we do also have the name tag, which you may be able to remember if you've seen my 7th Doctor and Axis Strike Dalek review. There was the name tag on the Dalek, the identification badge, whatever you want to call it. This time round it is now absent, although you probably won't be able to see it anywhere due to the Dalek being silver. And of course over the top of this as well there is a really lovely coating of dirt with blemishes and things, which is in fact quite obvious on the silver over the bronze of the rest of the body. Once again a nice touch, and again this does in fact vary on each individual Dalek, so I recommend going to store and picking your own in order to get one that you want to have. So overall, for the Dalek Scientist, an interesting variation to add to the collection, however nothing really too exciting. Naturally, I'm just happy to see a new series Dalek within the collection that isn't just your standard golden and bronze. It is nice to have a few changes within the colours, however it would have been nice to maybe see just something else that makes this Dalek stand out, be it a change in utensil or even a few more drastic colour scheme paint taps added over the top, just to make this stand out even further. If you are looking looking for a Dalek set with a more striking variant, I would certainly recommend the other two over this one, but naturally if you are a Dalek collector, a Dalek is a Dalek, and this one is a very nice sculpt indeed, featuring some really lovely detail, and no doubt you will probably want to add it to your collection. And in case you haven't seen my review of the 7th Doctor and Axis Strike Dalek, here is the Dalek Scientist, along with the other different types of bronze Daleks within the collection, and naturally he fits in very well. Before we move on to the War Doctor figure, I would just like to splice this in, because I'm aware that due to this being a product review, there will no doubt be a few Doctor Who fans who are watching this who are yet to cave and listen to Big Finish, and due to this being a Big Finish figure set review, I thought it would only make sense to in fact mention the War Doctor adventures themselves. Big Finish have produced a whole 4 box sets of War Doctor adventures, with 3 adventure stories in each, featuring the Daleks, Cardinal Lystra, the Sontarans, and the War Doctor's escapades within the Time War. And of course, due to the sad passing of John Hurt a number of years ago, Big Finish thankfully managed to create these box sets before it was too late, and now thanks to them we get to see further adventures of the War Doctor within the audio drama format, something of which that if didn't happen we would now never see at all. So if you are somebody who is intrigued by Big Finish or the audio drama format as a whole, I certainly recommend checking out the War Doctor adventures, because it's created some brilliant stuff and some great stories with combat with the Daleks and explosions and cool battles and everything like that, and even some really lovely sequences on Gallifrey as well. And whilst we are on the subject of the Time War, other Doctor Who Big Finish Time War series, including the War Master, are absolutely superb, as well as Gallifrey Time War, and of course the 8th Doctor Time War series as well, just recently has in fact released its 3rd volume of stories. And with that brief mention out of the way, now moving on to the War Doctor figure, of course as portrayed by John Hurt. Now this is exactly the same sculpt to the original War Doctor figure that was released alongside the 50th anniversary, and then of course the sculpt was later used as a part of the 13 Doctors set, seeing a rather striking difference where generally the colour palette was completely changed to be a lot darker, and it wasn't necessarily as accurate to what the costume was within the TV show. However, it was still a visually striking variant. This figure is much more reminiscent of the original version, so for those of you that did miss out on the original, this is a nice opportunity to get the figure. However, there has been a few noticeable changes in the paint apps to make this figure once again a slight variation from the original version. Most notably, of course, the scarf around the neck has now been removed. He no longer comes with Paul McGann's head or the moment, or even a sonic screwdriver. So firstly, to get it out of the way, what are the main differences from the original 50th anniversary version of the War Doctor and the B&M exclusive version? The original version has a burgundy scarf accessory. The B&M version does not. The waistcoat on the original 50th War Doctor seems darker, however the new one seems a much more lighter pea green. The leather jacket itself on the brand new B&M version seems to be a little bit of a darker brown base colour, and the weathering over the top is a rather orangey paint app. However, on the original 50th anniversary version, the weathering over the top is in fact a much lighter brown. The trousers on the new version do seem a little bit lighter than the original, along with the gaiters being a completely different colour, and the shoes at the bottom are a much darker coloured brown, as opposed to the original having a much more weathered design. And the paint application on the head sculpt is now also revised, which I will be taking a look at in further detail in a bit. So now taking a closer look at the costume in more detail, starting off with the waistcoat, which is now the lighter green colour. We do also have the paint application of the 2 sets of buttons running down the very middle, along with the silver chin, which has been given a nice silver highlight. Of course, down the very middle of the body itself, we do also have the bandolier that the War Doctor does get from Cass in The Night of the Doctor. This once again has a brown darker base colour, along with the silver highlight over the top. The scarf has also been removed. We get further exposure of the shirt section underneath, which has been painted a rather creamy colour, and it does have the detailing of the collar around the sides, along with some buttons running down the middle. The leather jacket is of course exactly the same sculpt to the original, and therefore retains the same amount of detail. We have the lapels at the very top that have been nicely sculpted to be raised above the leather jacket, and then we do also have the inclusion of the suggestion of pockets around the side. The cuffs of the jacket are also nicely sculpted, coming to a rather nice end, and at the back of the figure we do also have a series of different creases, which have been really nicely brought out by that rather orangey paint app applied over the top. Now I think that leather is very hard to replicate within the action action figure form, and I think that some of the latest versions of the 9th Doctor figure do a very good job of this. However, the War Doctor figure has always looked a little bit off and a bit unusual. I do quite like the paint application that has been applied to this figure, don't get me wrong, but as it comes to actually looking like the costume from the story, I think that it just looks a bit odd and not necessarily like leather, but something trying to be a battered kind of war-torn design. In a way, these kind of look more like stripes that have been painted on or designed onto the actual jacket itself, as opposed to weathering. Much like the original, the War Doctor's hands have been sculpted in a closed fist position. However, there is a hole down the very middle, meaning that he can hold a sonic screwdriver. However, he doesn't in fact come with one. So now moving further down the costume, we just have a lot of what we've seen already really, with a lot of creases and wrinkles within the material itself, which as I mentioned earlier has in fact been painted a lighter colour this time round. And then of course at the very bottom we have the gaiters. What I really love about this is also the inclusion of details around the button sections. Each individual one has been painted as silver, and we also have some weathering applied over the top of the creases on the gaiters to really emphasise the material effect. And I also love the way that one of them is actually popped open on this side here, and we have a few of the buttons kind of just loosely hanging, and then on the opposite side one of them is in fact not connected. We also have the addition of the buckle at the very bottom of the gaiters, and the same is also present on the opposite side. Once again, a great paint application and a really lovely attention to detail. However, the actual shoes themselves this time round just seem to be a rather blandish dark brown colour, as opposed to the original versions, which did seem to have quite a nice amount of weathering on. And I must say I do prefer the original versions over these new ones, because the new ones seem to be a little bit plasticky in appearance. And now taking a look at the likeness to the late John Hurt, a wonderful sculpt once again due to this figure using exactly the same design to the original one. The amazing detailing does of course still remain. A brilliant likeness to John Hurt. I really love the inclusion of the wrinkles at the top of the forehead, as well as the subtle addition of the eye bags just under the eyes. We also have a few creases and wrinkles around the sides of the nose, as well as the beard section just underneath. However, this has seen a little bit of a paint revision compared to the original version, and I think I'm kind of split between this one and the original one, because it is very unusual for me to in fact prefer B&M likeness over the original figure, as normally the B&M version is lacking in detail or lacking in something to make me prefer the original version more. However, I think the paint application to this one specifically looks a little bit more smarter and neater compared to the original version. This certainly applies to the hair. As you can see, we do have this lighter whitish grey colour that has been applied as a base, and then of course over the top of this we have the inclusion of the darker colour paint hap. Now specifically, I really love this where the hair actually sticks up at the very top of the head itself, really nicely bringing out each individual detail within the different strands of hair. I do really like this. I think comparing it to the original version, just bringing that one in now, of course this is a lot darker in its paint application. However, I think possibly ever so slightly too dark. I think that John Hurt has something about his hair where it does almost glow in the light, which this is something that this figure definitely does have, and the same can be applied to the facial hair as well, also being a little bit lighter and more creamy in colour compared to the original version, which I do still love. I think it is an absolutely brilliant figure. However, this one I do think actually has the edge. Also, the detailing of the ruffled eyebrows is really nice, as well as the detailing of the eyes that has been really nicely painted, incredibly sharp, including the iris. Overall, I'm in fact very impressed. And in case if any of you are wondering, the head is of course removable, much like the original version, meaning that if you so wished, you could in fact swap the heads around from the B&M one and put it on the original body. I think that both of the likenesses are really good, naturally, because it is the same sculpt. However, both of them are good in their different ways, and that is solely down to the paint application. And of course, the conclusion of this review does also conclude the rest of the Dr. Dalek B&M exclusive Big Finish collector sets. Overall, a rather strong wave of Doctor and Dalek figures, which are really creative in their design, especially the 8th Doctor and 7th Doctor, alongside their really creative and interesting interesting variations on new series Dalek. Don't get me wrong, the War Doctor set is also pretty nice and does feature a decent variant of John Hurt alongside another rather nice looking Dalek. However, it's just not as exciting as the others. Imagine that this wave is in fact going to be the first of hopefully many Doctor Who Big Finish sets in the future, and I imagine that in 2020 we may see another 3 sets released as a part of the B&M exclusive series. However, I have a slight feeling that in the next series they may in fact decide to do a classic series Doctor alongside the classic series Dalek sculpt as opposed to the new series designs, maybe harking back to the earlier eras of Doctor Who as opposed to that later half and into the Time War era. But if you are a fan of Big Finish as well as action figures, this series is physically made for you. So overall, for the Doctor Who B&M exclusive 2019 Character Options and Big Finish collaboration set featuring the War Doctor and Dalek Scientist from the Big Finish War Doctor series, once again another brilliant addition to the collection for Doctor and Dalek fans, especially for those of you that absolutely adore Big Finish audio dramas. Naturally, as I have expressed throughout this review, this set isn't as exciting as the 8th Doctor and Time Strategist along with the 7th Doctor and Axis Strike Dalek. However, it is still a decent variant, which for those collectors it will be worth adding to your collections, especially the actual Dalek itself will look great next to your other Daleks, and the War Doctor is a decent enough variant. If you're somebody of which who will only be picking and choosing different sets from this series, then the War Doctor set is probably one of the ones that I would recommend missing, because there is a lot of other decent figures within this series, such as the 2 TARDIS sets, such as the other 2 Big Finish sets that have been released, and as well as the Harry Sullivan figure as well. So if it's the case, as I say, of picking and choosing, then I probably wouldn't recommend this one unless you are a dedicated War Doctor fan. So that does of course conclude my reviews of the Character Options and Big Finish B&M exclusive collector sets of 2019. I hope you have enjoyed the videos. If you haven't checked out my other reviews as of yet of the previous sets, I highly recommend doing so, especially if you are considering buying them. And naturally check out all the other content that I do of course upload to the Host Productions on a weekly basis, covering all things Doctor Who. And on that note, I will see you all next time. Bye for now.